His name was Jesus. And they created a Jewish break-off from Judaism, which today is called Christianity. What proofs do they have of this? You already know. Right? Do they need proofs? Of course not, because they are experts. And then remember also, not as simple as that, because they will take proofs much the same way that Galileo used his telescope. Galileo is one of the great creators of our modern world. He was an evil man. But he recognized something that has been used by the scientists from his day until our present day. I have a telescope. You don't. I look at my telescope and it tells me that what you see every day is not right. You must trust me because I have a telescope. What if you buy a telescope? What will happen? Nothing. Why? Because you don't know how to read a telescope. So if I were to give you my telescope, I would be wasting a beautiful piece of equipment. Because you don't understand telescopes. You don't know how to use telescopes. You don't even know what you're looking at. And this is the key to the victory of modern science, which is called the Copernican Revolution, now in the last 500 years. The realization you don't have to prove anything. Even Galileo said it before the communists said it. You tell a lie, you tell it boldly, and you tell it again, and you tell it again, and tell it again, and one day they're going to say it's true. Don't prove it. Say it with conviction, and mock anyone that disagrees. Galileo was the first one to do that. He didn't invent anything, but he knew how to mock. He knew how to sell. He knew the power of the telescope. And he didn't realize that if he lied, who's going to catch it? A couple of intelligent guys maybe, but who's going to listen to them? Because I'm going to say the lie more boldly than they say the truth. That's the power. This is the foundation of modernism. Modernism begins with the Protestant Revolution, begins with Galileo and so on, but nonetheless we can't go into that. We have here the believer. Now what's a theologian? The theologian is the guy that explains to the believer what he believes. Like a psychiatrist. You know, he explains to you what you already believe. The theologian has a certain value because the actual purpose of the theologian is to be a bridge between the believer and the philosopher. Because the philosopher is a cold-hearted facts guy. He's like Mr. Spock. This is the way it is. If you don't like it, it's just too stinking bad. This hurts believers. The theologian, his job is to make believers and philosophers get along. How does he make believers and philosophers get along? He explains to believers what they believe. He gets the belief, he gets the confidence of the believer, and then he understands the teaching of the philosopher, and he slowly prepares the believer to accept what the philosopher teaches. He's like a middleman. He's a facilitator. He's a social worker. That's his job. It's a temporary job. Once the philosopher has full power, theologian gets executed. Once the philosopher has full power, believer is in prison. These guys are temporary. The historian. What is an historian? The historian is not a guy who tells you things that happen in history. We also watch sometimes the movie The Cardinal, part of our modernist. There's like a lot of options out there. The Cardinal, many Catholics have seen it. It's a wonderful 100% modernist movie. Catholics like it because it's got Latin in it, it's got incense, it's got, it's all Latin Mass. It was made before the new Mass. The guy wears a cassock. It's just wonderful. It's just straight heresy from beginning to end. The fact it was made by Jews in Hollywood is kind of a giveaway. There's something wrong with it. But the fact is, but it's interesting. One of the things the Cardinal, before the Cardinal, he's an American guy who becomes a Cardinal, and the movie is made in 1962. And and there's water that's leaking from a pipe and falls on a statue in an Italian parish where he is a newly ordained priest. And it's a weeping Madonna. So people start, well, Madonna is weeping, Madonna is weeping. And he says, oh, say your Hail Marys, everybody go home. He then finds out that it's a leaking pipe. His Jewish friend comes in and says, what happened? Well, the pipe's leaking on the Madonna. Are you going to tell the people? No, I'm not going to tell the people. So then they're going to believe a lie. They're not believing a lie. The Madonna wept. You're trying to tell me there was a miracle? No, that's just, I said the fact is that water leaked from the pipe, it hit the statue, and that made it look like it's weeping. It's not weeping. And he says to his Jewish friend, those are just facts. That's not what really happened. They're just facts. The fact is that God made the pipe, right? God made it able to rust. God made it leak at that point. He made it fall on the statue. The people think it's a miracle. What's the problem? So the people are benefited. The pipe needs to be fixed. We get to fix the pipe. Statue gets to be cleaned in extra time. What's the problem? These are just facts. What matters is the interpretation of the facts. An historian is an interpreter of facts. He's not about facts. He's an interpreter of facts. It is not his job to tell you what happened, who did what. His job is to tell you what was in the conscience, what was in the heart, what was in the mind of Napoleon when he decided to put his hand in his chest, when he decided to fight his wars. He's a describer of consciences and how they interact one with another, and he should not be disturbed by little things like facts. His job is to interpret the facts. Now when he interprets them, guess they're going to match the philosophy that he has. Notice the 7 heads. It's the same guy coming up. What's the first thing we know about history? First thing we know about history is that we can't know anything about history. But as we study history, we're going to discover that there are stories passed down to us. Napoleon was an emperor. Muhammad Ali was a boxer. And he was the greatest of all boxers who came from the Holy Land of Kentucky. Now, what do we know about that? This is a transfiguration of the real Muhammad Ali, who turned out to be a Cassius Clay guy. Now, it's a transfiguration of the real man into something that people needed. Remember, this was the 60s. People were in rebellion, and they were afraid of real fighting. Like one comedian said, he said, I don't understand about Muhammad Ali, because he told the American government, he says, I'm not going to kill him, because I'm a peace man of peace. So the government got mad at Napoleon, at Muhammad Ali, said, well, you're not going to kill him? We're not going to let you beat him up. So he likes to beat people up, but doesn't want to kill them. They want him to kill him, but they don't want him to beat him up. So he has a Thriller in Manila and, what is it, Rumble in the Jungle, right? Because he was running away from the draft. The people needed someone who was going to be violent, who was going to beat people up but not kill them. And so they took this guy from Kentucky, who actually learned how to box from a Catholic priest. Where else would you learn? One of Father Hannafin's classmates, who was our pastor here. He learned how to box. And they created this need. Did the real Muhammad Ali live? We know that. Can't really know. But we know that he did really, that there was a real Muhammad Ali. So guess what? You can go to the History Channel and you're going to get the story of the real Muhammad Ali. And what's that story going to be? Whatever the moron that made the story wants it to be. It doesn't matter anything what Cassius Clay really did. We're going to take that story and make it whatever we want it to be. Because we know that we don't know. We know that the guy who we believe is Muhammad Ali is actually a transfigured character that's not the real Muhammad Ali. He's disfigured, and the duty of the historian, of the journalist, of the philosopher, of the critic, is to get rid of all the disfigurations. We also know that every man of history never ever does anything that's extraordinary. And we also know that they can never do anything without their self-interest. We apply these principles to every single case. The priest that did that back in the 1800s was called Father Alvin. Is it Alvin or Albin? Alvin, right? Father Alvin Butler, who made Butler's Lives of the Saints. Pull out your 1860 edition of Butler's Lives of the Saints. Look up St. Christopher. This is pre-Vatican II, about 100 years before Vatican II. He says, we don't know that Christopher really, we know that we don't know that Christopher really existed. We know that the Christopher that is the one that we think in our tales carried Christ across the water and is a patron of travelers and who did miracles. We know that that is not the real Christopher. That is a disfigured Christopher who was transfigured by the belief of Christians down the last 1,000 years. But we're pretty sure that there was a real Christopher, because after all, the church has a feast of St. Christopher. Now, why is it that Christopher was really a big guy? And Butler tells us, well, it's because there was a big statue. There were little people going to a big church, and there was a big statue of St. Christopher. So you got the idea, he's a big man. Now these people, and he gives a short explanation, but to complete the explanation, these people wanted someone big and strong to protect them. And they wanted someone to carry them across the rivers of life. And so they made this character, who was probably a real saint, a really holy guy, but we don't know much about him. We know that the real Christopher is transfigured by popular tradition, disfigured, and that the historian is going to pull apart the disfiguration and bring us back to the real Christopher. There was another life of St. Francis Xavier. Father Giselle read it. It's a big, long life. My brother read it too. I forget what Jesuit wrote it. In the documentation of the canonization of St. Francis Xavier, I think there's 40 recorded confirmed miracles, raising people from the dead, driving devils away. Remember, the church is really strict in its confirmation of miracles. In the Jesuits' life of St. Francis Xavier, he admits only one miracle. And that is that there was a storm, and he threw crucifix in the water. The storm stopped, and the crab brought him the crucifix in India. The other miracles, raising from the dead and speaking in tongues, we're not sure that they ever happened. And the real saint, the reason why St. Francis Xavier is a saint, because he was just a downright spiritual guy. He did fasting, he prayed, he was just downright holy. But the miracles, we know he performed miracles, but did he perform all the miracles they say? I don't think so. It's popular imagination. There was a saying from the 19th century that in the breviary, we mention it sometimes in sermons, he is a liar like the second nocturne. It's a saying of Catholic priests, 19th and 20th century. He is a liar like the second nocturne. Now, you know, when we say matins, first nocturne, we have 3 readings, and you read sacred scripture. Second nocturne, we have 3 readings, and you read the life of the saint of the day. One example of such reading is the life of St. Clement of Rome. And it tells us that Clement, the Pope, he was martyred in the Red Sea, in the Black Sea. They took a, a millstone, put it around his neck, and tied him to an anchor. They tied him to an anchor. They brought him out of the Black Sea about 10 miles, and they dumped him in the water and drowned him. The people wanted to get St. Clement's body. The Black Sea receded 10 miles, and the people walked into the sea, and there was a small church at the bottom of the sea with St. Clement's body laying in it, with the anchor, holding the anchor. They took him and the anchor out of the sea, and that's what it says in the breviary that we read. Many other miracles. This is an example of one. And what do they say? This is something which is extraordinary. Therefore, we know with certainty it didn't happen. But we still accept that there was a real St. Clement. The one that we think of as St. Clement is a disfigured Clement who was transfigured by the popular love of simple people of the past who were not as smart as people today. Why were people of the past not as smart as people today? Because of evolution. The later you are in development, the smarter you are. The older you are, the dumber you are. The further back you are, you were stupid and you believed simple things. Now people don't believe simple things. Historian, agnosticism, vital eminence of the community produces a transfigured Clement. This transfigured is disfigured from the real Clement. The historian, get rid of the illusions. Now let's go to America, because sometimes they even do it the right way. All Americans know that we have a St. George, who is the founder of our country. What's his name? What is it? St. George. St. George, he was under that stupid, apple tree? Cherry tree. One of those things. He was under the cherry tree. He found the Lord. He got saved. He was just, see, the guy was a walking saint. Got baptized on his, I heard him once again, he was baptized on his deathbed, went straight to heaven with the angels. He's a saint. It's obvious. Okay, he was a Mason. Nobody is perfect. He was the head of Alexandria Lodge 22, which is the guys that are trying to destroy Christ in the Catholic Church. Everybody's got imperfections, okay? What do you do nowadays? George Washington needed to be a saint 100 years ago. Why? Because we had to destroy Christianity inside of the American people. Therefore, you make a Mason hero. Now he becomes like a saint. Now we don't need saints anymore. We don't want patriotism anymore. So the same guy that made George Washington into a saint, guess what he's making him into now? What? He's a demon. Go to the History Channel. Read about George Washington. He had 317 slaves. The guy was a slave owner. He was a pig. Why did George Washington fight in the Revolution? Because he married Martha. I forget what her last name was. But Martha had 17 million